Thank you for joining us for our second general session today. We have another great slate of speakers set for you now. My name is Michael Crowder, President-elect for NACD. Most of you know me by now, but if you don't, I grew up in Southern Indiana and now live in Eastern Washington State. In college, I received degrees in natural resources and environmental science, along with a master's in wildlife science from Purdue University. I served 8 years as an adjunct professor at Washington State University and taught classes and led graduate research in wetland restoration, wildlife science, and ecology. I have served as the general manager for 21 years and partner for 8 years at a 2,000-acre ranch along the Yakima River in a 6 to 8 inch yearly rainfall zone. On the ranch, we are working on a long-term wetland restoration project to increase wildlife habitat, water quality, irrigation efficiencies, and other factors. The ranch has been recognized by several organizations for conservation work and has been named as a soil health champion by NACD for our use in intensive cattle rotations for wildlife habitat and soil health. I'm also a partner of my family's corn, soybean, and grass hay farm in Indiana, along with several personal conservation easements in Illinois. Conservation is at the core of both my professional and personal lives and has been a part of who I am since childhood. Having grown up in the Midwest and experiencing firsthand water erosion issues and other challenges facing row crop farmers that are so familiar to many farmers in the US, it is an advantage for me that I have also lived, ranched, and farmed in an extremely low rainfall zone and know the challenges that that environment holds. I can confidently and competently speak to fellow farmers, staffers, agency folks, and Congress about challenges facing farmers, ranchers, and landowners because I have lived them and deal with these challenges every day. In normal times, we would all be together, talking in the halls, going to dinners, learning from each other, but things are different this year. We are not on Bourbon Street in the evening listening to jazz and eating some of the world's best food, but we will be there again in 2 years. COVID has changed the world. We all know it. Simply put, 2020 has been a hard year. Everything is different than when we were in Las Vegas just 1 year ago. We have lost members of our conservation family to this pandemic, but I'm happy to tell you that NACD has continued to advocate for you and for conservation. We have continued to support leadership training, to increase district capacity, and to deliver technical assistance grants to our members. I would like to commend and thank our staff that keep doing their jobs during challenging times. NACD has continued to represent you to build and strengthen partnerships with our friends at the Natural Resource Conservation Service, National Conservation District Employees Association, National Association of State Conservation Agencies, and so many other organizations that we work with on a regular basis. We have continued to work on your behalf on Edge of Field and other similar projects, to the Ecosystem Services Market Consortium Board, and as advisors to the EPA's Farm, Ranch, and Rural Communities Committee, along with so many other projects. We are out there working. We have continued to advocate on your behalf to congressional members, to staffers, and federal and state agencies. We have continued to participate in the National Conservation Planning Partnership to help guide conservation work, planning, and capacity into the future. This is just a small list of the work accomplished in the last year by staff and volunteers. There will likely be a pre- and post-COVID world. There are some benefits that we have found in that Zoom and other online platforms have allowed us to have online meetings, to see each other, and to conduct business that were available before, but not widely used. However, these pluses in no way outweigh not being able to meet in person, not being able to take tours, trainings, and all of the other means of being together in person. I want you to know that the staff and leadership at all levels, from local county districts to NACD, have continued to do their job, continue to do what must be done to continue the path to the future. I thank all of you for being online here today, for taking steps that must be done to make sure we stay as safe and healthy as possible. We will continue to do that but I do look forward to the time. Hopefully soon, we can all safely get back together in person. Thank you for what you do and your support of NACD. We have 3 days of great speakers, superb leadership training, and breakout sessions planned, so I hope everyone takes advantage of the knowledge that is being shared. Please do not hesitate to reach out to us if you have questions or if we can help. With that, let's move on to our session and to our keynote speaker. Our first speaker is Ebony Weber, Chief Operations Officer for the National Society for Minorities in Agriculture, Natural Resources, and Related Sciences, also known as Manors. Hailing from a rural town in Mississippi Delta, Ebony has worked for Manors for the last 17 years and has devoted her life to developing future leaders in conservation, agriculture, and natural resources related sciences. Ms. Weber strives daily to transform Manors into a nationally recognized name, as well as developing young minority students into future leaders. Focused on developing strategic partnerships and building collaborative teams, Ms. Weber drives innovation and growth through programs connecting students and professionals in academia, government, nonprofit, and private industry. Now, please welcome Ebony Weber.
Good morning, and welcome to my presentation today on how to boost your diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. I am Ebony Weber, Chief Operating Officer for Manors. So Manors is an organization, minorities in agriculture, natural resources, and related sciences. I've worked for this organization for 17 years. It's been my only job out of college. I hail from a small rural town in Mississippi where I was surrounded by agriculture my whole life. But little did I know that, not until I started working for Manors and really began to understand what agriculture was and how it had been so important in my day-to-day life as I grew up. As an organization, Manors supports its members by providing them with mentorship, guidance, and support in terms of what it looks like to grow professionally, personally, and how to advance your career. These have been successful in me growing in my role as the Chief Operating Officer for Manors, and what we look to continue to do for our members as we move forward to help them grow in this space as well. I'm really passionate about working with individuals to help them realize where they can find their passions in food, agriculture, and natural resources, and really advocating for inclusion and diversity as it relates to this industry. Coming from a place that wasn't very diverse and inclusive growing up, it has really fueled my passion in this space. So who is Manors and what do we do, you probably ask. So Manors is an organization that was founded on the college campus of Michigan State University. It was founded by a group of college students at the time who was really looking for support in a community as they wanted to advance their careers in the food and agriculture space. Well, that wasn't present at the time in the early 80s. They formed an exchange program within the Pennsylvania State Chapter and formed an organization called MANRRS, which was Minorities in Agriculture and Natural Resources Association in 1984. And as other Midwestern schools and other land grants began to hear about this MANRRS organization and its support, they all wanted to be involved because they too were struggling with their students, their minority students, really finding a place and having that community as they also were focused on careers in food and agriculture. Well, fast forward to 1989, Manors was incorporated with 13 universities back then at the College of University of Maryland Eastern Shore. Today, Manors has more than 70 chapters across the country at colleges and universities. And today, we still are focused on the support and mentorship of underrepresented students from these different communities. So what is our mission at Manors? Manors' mission is to empower individuals on underrepresented and diverse backgrounds in agriculture, natural resources, and related science careers. And we do this by providing continuing education, peer and professional mentor networks, and advocacy, which all leads to rewarding economic avenues, accomplishment, and advancements. So really just a lot of jargon to say we really want to support and provide access and opportunities for these minority students and professionals who are pursuing careers in food and agriculture. Our vision as an organization is to be the premier worldwide organization dedicated to career and professional development of a diverse, highly skilled membership, all leading to create opportunities and advancement in this food, ag, and natural resource space. As an organization, Manors has over 2,000 active members across the country, with 85% of those being students and 15% being professionals. We have an active database of more than 10,000 members, students, and professionals who all are currently or have once been affiliated with Manors as a member, either in collegiate, in college, or in high school. Our program starts as young as middle school through high school and goes all the way through retiree. Today, Manors has more than 70 chapters across the country, located in 39 states and Puerto Rico. 30% of our institutions are considered minority serving institutions, which are 1890s. Those are your historical Black colleges and universities with agricultural programs. We have our traditional historical Black colleges and universities. Those are schools without agricultural programs. Hispanic serving institutions, and more recently, we're working to partner with some of our tribal colleges to begin to erect minors programs at their colleges as well. We also diverse in terms of our representation in majors that our members are studying. There are more than 75 STEM related disciplines within the Manors membership. So that's everything from animal health, animal science, agriculture, all the way through zoology and everything in between. So we do tend to highlight the agriculture, natural resources, and the related sciences that support the work that ag and natural resource professionals do. So what does a Manors journey look like for most of our members? So it's just before I said that you can be a member for life in Manors, and our program starts as early as middle school and high school and goes all the way through professional. And as you can see here, there are different considerations we make for each of those personas and membership types as they matriculate through the organization, focusing on everything from career awareness and readiness to professional development, career coaching, and then also that leadership development. So as they become professionals, they're continuing to be developed, but also paying it forward to the next generation. Some of our secondary partners include Boys and Girls Club, the National Urban League, Jobs for America's Graduates, National FFA Organization, Agriculture Future of America, 4-H, and many, many others. We at Manors have a motto that says we change the face of agriculture by linking hands around the world. And for us, we know that we can't change the face of agriculture. We can't do this work alone without partnerships and collaborations. And so we look to our partners to help us transform the industry one face at a time. And so what are some of those partnership benefits that you receive from being connected with Manors? So one, providing those leadership and career development for Manors members. That's something that we've always strived and continue to do with our many government, industry, and academia partners. Also offering sustainable career connections and academia networks. We talked about those 70 plus universities that are affiliated with the organization, those 30 to 40 different industry organizations that partner with the organizations, all work hand in hand to ensure that these career networks are established and they're sustainable. Also engaging and interacting with life science students and professionals. So I always say it's hard to aspire to be something you've never seen. And so for us, it's really casting that wide net and ensuring that we're bringing as many professionals and students in the fold that can help support and provide the mentorship and interaction that our students need to be successful. And I will like to just note, you don't have to be a person of color in order to be involved in Manors, to be active in Manors, or to be a mentor in Manors. Also, as part of our benefits we offer to both partners and members is developing preferred access and pipeline to scholarships and internships. And so we're really proud to say that when we're working with our membership base, if we're recommending access and opportunities, um, we also try to connect those with scholarships. So how do you pay and fund these opportunities? And how do you go and build the skill sets if you don't have them? And that's why scholarships and internships are really important. And then last, but certainly not least, is improving cultural and career awareness through experiential learnings and exposure. At Manors, we believe you learn by doing and you grow by immersion. And so for us, is really how do we bring these experiences to life? How do we immerse you into these opportunities so you're able to fully grow and develop from your interactions within Manors? And so today, as we talk about how do you boost your diversity initiatives in your organization, we're going to look at what's the big picture and what's your vision for your organization. So one, starting out, defining what diversity means to your organization. For every organization, this is going to be different. What diversity may look like in my organization may be totally different than what your diversity needs may be in your organization. So be careful to not do a cookie cutter approach, or that you're and making sure that you're very intentional about diagnosing where you're wanting to go as an organization, and not just having a blanket term that doesn't really have hardcore data or metrics that you're trying to achieve or who you're trying to target more specifically. Also looking at making sure that your diversity numbers mirror somewhat of what the national minority representation is for the US. Right now, focusing on racial minority representation, that number collectively is about 40%. And so making sure in our organizations, if 40% is not the goal, how do you get close to making sure that your organization is somewhat compatible and comparable to what's going on nationally in terms of representation? So I know here we're focused on racial minority, but that could be other protected classes such as gender, veteran status, people with different abilities, different orientations. So all of those things can be factored into your minority representation at your organization or within your industry. Also, the third is increasing representation of all underrepresented groups in key leadership roles. So a lot of times organizations began to look at increasing their diversity through internships and entry-level roles, but we want to challenge organizations to begin to look higher up. So beginning to look at some of your C-suite positions, your board leadership, those that have key decision-making roles, those who have profit and loss accountability, those who have decision-making roles. These are the leadership roles that we want to begin to target to ensure that we have increased representation up and down the career chain and ladder within our respective organizations. And then last but not least is dispelling the myth that Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and as well as women, are not interested in ag and natural resources careers. So many times I've heard that there are just not enough women who are interested in this, and there are not enough minorities who want to go into this space. So I think in my experience of being in the industry almost 20 years, I've met hundreds and thousands of women as well as minorities who are all interested in looking for opportunities to work in the food, ag, and natural resource industry. So I just want us to be mindful about where we should be sourcing talent, casting a wider net and where we get talent, but just really dispelling the myth that these individuals are not out there and that they're not pursuing careers within this space. So what are some of those barriers that increase, that barriers that lead to decreased diversity, I should say. So one is inclusive language and imagery. And I think for this, we should have said exclusive language and imagery. So when people go to your website and when they read your brochures and look at your board and your leadership team, what type of message is that signaling to those individuals who may be from diverse backgrounds or may come from underrepresented communities? Do they see individuals that they identify with within your leadership, within your messaging? Are you targeting programs and policies that affect their community? So these are some of the things that individuals look for as they visit your website and look to learn more about your organization, and could also be barriers that may prevent them from moving forward with being interested in your organization. So to go along with it also is just discrimination and stereotypes. So this could be both internal and external, in terms of sometimes we believe the hype that, you know, this isn't a place for a Black woman to serve because I don't see any other Black women serving in leadership roles in the conservation industry. Or, you know, what other factors could be decreasing or, you know, factoring in on why we don't have enough in this example, Black women serving in leadership roles. So being keen to know that discrimination is happening, whether it's conscious or subconscious, and we should be mindful of making sure that we're looking at those policies that may be inadvertently causing these type of decreased diversity efforts, and also stereotypes. So making sure that imposter syndrome is real and that we're not kind of buying into the idea that this place isn't welcoming to any one particular underrepresented group. And so for some of those individuals, it's lack of family support. And so it's hard for, you know, families to support what they don't understand. And so making sure that we're going the extra mile sometimes to not only talk to individuals, so this goes back to inclusive language and imagery, but also how do we begin to provide that support so individuals can, you know, have that support that they need from home in order to pursue these careers. So just increasing that knowledge and awareness. Sometimes it's just lack of confidence in mentors. So again, how do I pursue or gain successful employment in this space if I don't know anyone who's successful in this space? So how do I gain the confidence and the mentors I need to be successful? And this is sometimes a barrier for those groups who are looking at an entryway into the industry. Then, of course, there's unconscious bias, and how this unconscious bias may play out in our decision making, in our policies, in our hiring, and what are some of those subsequent consequences from some of our unconscious bias. And then there's insular recruiting. And insular recruiting is organizations who are tending to recruit within foundation networks and by word of mouth. So do you always send your job announcements and postings to the same group of people? Do you always recruit from the same institutions? And so one of the things we always say, if you want to do something, want something different, then you have to do something different. So making sure that you're more intentional about your outreach, where you're recruiting, casting a wider net, and then also where's your organization showing up? And then more importantly, where are you not showing up to? And making sure that you're able to put yourself and your organizations in communities that are diverse and are part of the communities that you're hoping to target to recruit to come and work for your organization and or to be customers of your organizations. And then last but not least, most organizations are lacking a dedicated diversity manager. And I can say this work is more of a marathon than a sprint. And so to add these duties on to any one person's lengthy laundry list of duties that we probably already have within our role is really going to do it diminish your capabilities, and also devalue the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion within your organization. This is more than enough work for more than one person. So to divvy it up and have one person serving in multi roles that has some accountability for diversity, equity, inclusion, I don't think you're going to move the needle the way you want to. There should be someone that's dedicated on staff, a committee, or a team that's working to really advance your diversity efforts. And so what are some of the recommendations we have to move the needle forward? So the first being around tracking and transparency. You can't measure something, you can't grow for something you can't measure and you can't see. And so diversity statements without a plan and rigorous data collection is not sufficient. So at that place, you're just collecting a bunch of data and creating some statements, but you're not lining those two together. So making sure that your data collection supports your statements and where your organization is envisioning on going. Also, organizations and associations should institute annual diversity and inclusion assessments. So making sure you just do an audit every year, whether those are assessments on belonging, engagement, just data collection on who makes up your employment on your workforce. And so these are things that organizations could use to really benchmark. And again, how do you know how you're growing if you're not measuring these different matrices? And then also disclosure should facilitate sharing of strategies for addressing unconscious bias and overhauling recruiting beyond just the top leadership. So again, making sure once you do the assessments that you disclose and share this out with your leadership, share this out with your employees so that they too can then hold you accountable and also hold themselves accountable for where the organization started and where it's growing. Because again, it's going to take everyone to buy into this effort in order for it to be successful. The next thing is accountability. Foundation, NGOs, so non-government organizations, and government agencies should integrate diversity goals into performance evaluations and grant-making criteria. One of the number one pitfalls that we found with diversity efforts, if no one is held accountable for not moving the needle forward, then how do you move the needle forward? So what we found is that it has to be tied back. Some way you have to hold people accountable. Either that's for doing a great job, or if you find some that are not upholding the values of the organization, how do you then hold them accountable to what you said was important? And so it's really important that organizations find ways to tie their diversity initiatives back to performance evaluations, back to organizational evaluations, and back to grant making criteria, because these are all one way or all additional ways that we can hold individuals accountable for their actions and for their strategies. And then next, conservation associations should use their convening roles to showcase diverse leaders and increase diversity and inclusion initiatives. So using platforms such as this, such as your conference, to highlight and showcase leaders such as myself, to showcase how diversity and inclusion is important to you as an industry, and being able to show those initiatives and strategies to the larger audience so that they can begin to buy into those ideas, and also have a blueprint on how they can move forward in their local and regional offices and locations. And then lastly are resources. So making sure that there are increased resources must be allocated for diversity initiatives to work. So this goes back to the previous slide, is that it can't be a tag along to something that's already going on. It should be its own dedicated kind of initiative and have dedicated resources to support the work and the individuals doing the work. Also, there should be provided a sustainable funding for networking to reduce isolation. This work can be very overwhelming and it can be very daunting to one individual having to kind of do it alone, because it then tends to, at least the belief is that the diversity works falls on the diversity person. And so being able to provide this person with support to network with other diversity professionals in the industry, to learn and grow and attend other events so that they can bring those learnings back to the organization, and for them to be able to partner with other organizations and individuals who can provide training and leadership in a space around diversity, equity, inclusion, especially if it's a skill set in the area that your organization currently does not possess. These are all ways in which you can work with external partners to kind of advance your goals around diversity, equity, inclusion, but it's going to take some sustainable funding to kind of keep that work going so that it's not a one and done type of effort. And then last but not least, making sure that there's executive sponsorship and support of employee resource groups. So that has been one of the staples as we've seen organizations get their D&I work off the ground, is implementing employee resource groups. And those can be groups dedicated to gender. So there can be women in ag groups, there can be groups that dedicated to millennials and different age groups. There can be work groups, of course, dedicated to different racial and nationalities. There can be employee resource groups dedicated to those in veteran status and sexual orientation. So whatever your group may be, employee resource groups are definitely one of the more catchier or I guess trendier areas that a lot of organizations are moving into. Both industry, state, and even some academia organizations are starting to adopt different type of affinity groups. And then what are some of those best practices? And so one that we kind of highlighted is making sure that there's adequate and stable funding for your diversity and inclusion efforts. And this is just kind of not a one and done type of effort. Ensuring that there's adequate and committed leadership, which goes right into the second point, which adequate organizational buy-in. Typically, your organization will buy in if the CEO or the person at the very top of the organization has mandated that this is something that is important to the company. So having that committed and adequate leadership at the very top of the organization makes it much easier for your organization to buy into these goals. Where we have seen organizations struggle is that as you have various locations and field stations and other areas outside of kind of like your headquarters, is how do you begin to make sure that those goals and efforts are translated down to the field stations and some of those more remote locations. And I know organizations are still looking at ways to ensure that those messagings and narrative is translated all the way through from top down and bottom up through the organization. Also being able to have the ability to communicate across race, class, gender, and cultural lines. So again, looking at all of the ways in which your organization can be diverse and making sure that you have programming and you have language that speaks to those different areas of your workforce, and making sure that you're able to articulate things that are important to those various groups of individuals. Also is institutionalizing diversity, equity, and inclusion goals. And so again, this goes back to some of those performance goals and how do you begin to make these more measurable and be able to hold individuals accountable for moving the organization towards being a more inclusive and equitable organization. And also, how do you translate diversity training into action? A lot of times we come into these trainings and they give you theories and a bunch of things on PowerPoint and sticky notes, and you go back to your office and sit at your desk like, now, how do I do this? And so making sure that you're able to develop not only goals that your organization would adopt, but what are those step-by-step strategies that you would use in order to implement those goals. And so those are what organizations would tend to begin to move more towards goal defining and setting to, more actionable steps to achieving those goals. And then last is making sure that you enact or have some type of diversity committee or task force at minimum, if there's not a dedicated diversity manager, who can emphasize why the importance of diversity in senior leadership is important and why diversity throughout the organization is important. And these are what we found are best practices across those organizations that are doing it really well, regardless of their size and their scope as an organization. These are some of the fundamental things that you can do as an individual leader within your organization or as an industry to help move you forward. And with that, I know it was a lot of information to share, but I appreciate you sitting through this presentation today. If you have any questions or if you are interested in working and collaborating with Manors, you can look us up on www.manors.org, or you can find me, Ebony Weber, on LinkedIn, and I would love to connect with you. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your conference.
Thank you, Ebony. It's important that we all think critically about how we can make conservation more diverse, inclusive, and equitable, and help put those ideas into action. No matter where you live, what your race, or how diverse the area you live in, we can all help with inclusion of natural resources issues we all hold dear. Up next, we're discussing NACD's legacy with the help of a former NACD president, a former NACD CEO, and a former NRCS Chief. This powerful anniversary panel in honor of NACD's 75th is moderated by the Soil and Water Conservation Society's Chief Executive Officer, Clare Lindahl, and is sponsored by the AgriDrain Corporation. Clare became CEO of SWCS in August of 2017. The Society's mission is to foster the art and science of natural resource conservation. SWCS and its membership have been advancing conservation through education, advocacy, special projects, and a scientific journal since 1943. In 2020, she saw the Society through its own 75th anniversary celebrations. Lindahl previously served as the Executive Director for the Conservation Districts of Iowa, as well as Natural Resources Program Manager with River Action, a not-for-profit organization dedicated to fostering the environmental, economic, and cultural vitality of the Mississippi River and its riverfront in the Quad Cities. Clare has worked with communities and farmers through Scott County Soil and Water Conservation District, as well as partners of Scott County Watersheds in Davenport, Iowa, to help improve water quality in Duck Creek and other local streams that flow into the Mississippi River. She holds a degree in landscape architecture from Iowa State and received her post-baccalaureate certificate in environmental geographic systems from Western Illinois University. Welcome, Clare, and I'm going to turn things over to you to introduce today's panelist.
Okay, thank you for that introduction, Michael. It is an honor to be moderating NACD's 75th anniversary panel, both because of the work that I have done with districts throughout my career and because the Soil and Water Conservation Society just celebrated our 75th anniversary of supporting conservation professionals, many of which work for and with districts. I want to start with a big thank you to AgriDrain for sponsoring today's panel and for all they do for organizations like both of ours and Soil and Water Conservation. And thank you to everyone tuning in today to NACD's 75th annual meeting. Today's panel discussion will highlight the work, partnership, legacy, and future of America's conservation districts and their unified voice, the National Association of Conservation Districts. Conservation districts rose out of the devastation of the Dust Bowl in the 1930s, but it wasn't until 1946 that a group gathered together to form a national conservation district organization. The conservation leaders today we have on today's panel really need no introduction, but then what would they have me here for? So I will start out with our first panel, Krysta Harden, who currently serves as Executive Vice President of Global Environmental Strategy for Dairy Management, Inc., and Chief Operating Officer of the U.S. Dairy Export Council. She has also served in leadership positions at Corteva, AgriScience, and USDA, and spent 5 years as the CEO of NACD. Also joining us today is Dave White, President of Ecosystem Services Exchange, a technical assistant firm focused on water quality, and co-founder of the 9B Group, a benefit corporation which consults and lobbies for sustainable agriculture. Dave has also served as chief of the NRCS. And then our final panelist today is Rudy Rice. Rudy is a lifelong dairy and grain farmer from Illinois and has been on the board of the Perry County SWCD for 46 years. He also served in leadership with his state association and as president of NACD. You can find our panelists' full bios on the meeting hub, but for time's sake, let's dive into some questions. So the first question is for everyone. And today we have this former NACD CEO, we have a chief of the NRCS and an NACD president. And each of you have worked closely with districts. And I want to start by giving you all a moment to reflect on the topics that have been important to conservation districts during your work with them. Do those topics still persist today? And imagine what the topics of importance to conservation districts will be in the future. Krysta, start us off.
Well, thank you, Claire, and thanks to my panelists. It's good to be with old friends, and I just wish we were in person. There's so many fun stories to tell, and I wish I'd had the hallway talk and the lunch and dinners to be able to catch up with a lot of district officials. My time with NACD was some of the best years of my life, mainly because how much I learned. And how many of the issues that I think that districts embraced for 75 years, frankly, some of them now are really becoming to their own. We're starting to see it, wider spread understanding and the need for things like soil health and emissions and water quality. It's not just relegated to one part of our conversation, not to one part of a farm bill, but instead, I think it's really becoming more mainstream. I think consumers are more involved. They want to know where their food's coming from. They want to know how it's produced. And I can tell you that from dairy firsthand, the pressures that are on, dairy farmers about production and that carbon footprint, the other issues that we talked about. So I think the issues have been around a long time. That's why districts were created. You talked about the history, but I think we are getting more attention, which I hope means more resources, more people engaged, more dollars, more investment to help farmers and ranchers and landowners deal with these challenges and really hopefully turn them into opportunities for the future.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. Dave, do you want to build on that? What was important to districts during your work, and how has that changed, and what's it going to be like in the future?
Well, next time I want to go before Krysta. she nailed all the topics. I think back to Hugh Hammond Bennett and the creation of the district movement, where everyone was focused on soil erosion, but it's so much more than that. As we move from 1933 to 1946 to today, so many of the issues are still the same. I think what is so unique about us is the approach. So whether it's water quality or water quantity or wildlife or soil erosion or greenhouse gas emissions or whatever else is coming, it's the local based districts, the federal, state, local cooperation that really is the consistent glue that holds us all together. Districts are unique in this. There is no other substitute for whatever happens. I can recall saying when I was chief that the quality of our environment will depend upon the quality of the decisions that the men and women who own and operate our land make. Because 70% of the land in the lower 48 states is owned by us. You can pave the national forest and all the federal lands with gold, and it's still going to be the farmlands, the ranch lands, the woodlots across America. And there's only one entity that can reach every single one of those, and those are the conservation districts. So the issues today, Krysta outlined greatly. I think issues tomorrow is, of course, climate change will be a very big factor in this coming administration, coming years. We're also going to see increased emphasis on sustainability. Krysta said people want to know where their food is produced and how it's produced. They're also going to, if we're going to keep our export markets up, a lot of our countries that import are going to demand sustainability information. I think how we treat our source water. We've got a lot of issues with water quality, and the water we drink has to be protected. So I think those are some of the main things we're going to see in the next few years, Claire.
Thank you, Dave. Rudy, what have you seen throughout your time with districts, and what's to come?
Well, thank you, Claire, and hello to my fellow conservationists that's on the call, or it's on the Zoom today watching us. It would be great to be together. After listening to Krysta and Dave, I don't know much of what else to say, other than I can do you one better on what the district directors on the local, state, and national level were concerned about. Whenever I was in presidency of NACD, we had a building in League City, Texas, we called the service center. And at that service center, it was a repository for all things NACD. And we had a couple of meetings a year down there. And at every break, I would go into what we referred to as a Water Davis Memorial Library. And Water Davis was the second president of NACD, and pull off the shelf the original handwritten minutes for the late 40s and early 50s of NACD, and sit there and read them just to see what the directors and officials were talking about way back then. And I jotted down 4 different areas that they were talking about. We were talking about at the 50th, and we're still talking about today. I'd say at least half of what they were talking about at the beginning, we're still discussing today. And the first one is chasing dollars. I think most of the energy that I've spent in the conservation work has been chasing dollars on the local, on the state, and the national level to keep our programs, our projects, and our employees in place. And that has consumed a whole lot of time. The second one is Dave alluded to about the locally led. We're the only entity in the nation that can reach out and touch about every acre, every productive acre in this country, but not only productive acres, you know, all the other acres that we can reach out and touch them with our almost 17,000 offices. I guess there's still 17,000 offices today, you know, and the people that are employed, you know, all the way from Hawaii to Florida, Alaska to Texas and Maine, all the way out to, you know, California, plus other spots. So we can reach out and touch the landowners, operators, and, you know, all of them. And the third thing is technical assistance they were talking about. I've been around long enough that whenever I started 47, well, you said 46, but actually, whenever this is aired, it'll be 47 years, Claire. We had 2 full-time SCS, there you go, Dave, SCS employees detailed to our district, and we had a part-time secretary that worked for our district. And over the years, I've seen as many as SCS employees detailed to our district, and we went from a part-time to 2 full-time, but now we're really struggling. We have a 1 full-time district employee, plus our district DC now is covering 3. Whenever our DC covered our district alone, our district DC is now covering 3 districts. And him and his staff, we're lucky if we have an NRCS employee in our district 1 day or 2 days a week max. And so technical assistance is really becoming a challenge. And the last thing Dave hit on, I agree with totally, is that local leadership. We got to surface the best of the best to set on these boards and make policy and look at what, you know, is going on around them and bring that up and, you know, get in place what needs to be in place for the conservation of our resources in this country. Because everybody has a say in these resources if we like it or not.
Yeah, that's a great wrap up to that question, Rudy. Districts have always been at the heart of these issues, and even as the issues evolve, it's still the core things the districts were working on in the beginning, and in the future, we will need more resources to do the work that needs to get done. And that's what I really took from that. It's great. Krysta, one thing districts do really well is bringing together various stakeholders around conservation issues and opportunities. And you yourself have had successful conservation endeavors across government and nonprofit and private sectors. So what sort of partnerships is it going to take to move conservation forward as we look towards the future? And what's the role of districts and NACD in that? We've got a lot of new partners at the table, a lot of new people at the table, as we just discussed.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid question. And some of this I've been saying forever, and some of it is new. But when I think about partnerships and the role of districts and NACD is being that convener, being that safe place that can bring people together that disagree, that challenge each other, that ask questions, that look through different lenses. I think we have to continue to have that diversity of thought and recognize that we have to listen, as I say, with a capital L, listen to learn, listen not to convince somebody that your way is right and the only way. I think we also have to have partnerships sometimes that make us uncomfortable, that may scare us a little bit and say, I don't know if I want them at the table. I think that's what we need to do, that look different, that talk different, that come from different walks of life, that really help us look at ways to get the better answers, to really stretch ourselves and challenge ourselves. Districts do have 75 years of very, very rich history and of getting results. There is absolutely no doubt. And I'm still a huge, huge proponent of districts and the work that's done at the local level, but we cannot rest on our laurels. We cannot just look back. There's a saying when somebody taught me at church, my little church was about to die, and somebody stood up and said, it's okay to look back, but don't stare. And I think that's a great lesson for all of us. It's okay to have this rich history. I'm so proud of it. I'm extremely privileged to be a tiny part of that history, but we cannot stop there. We have got to use that to leverage to new partnerships, new ideas, to get new results, to meet these new challenges.
That's incredibly thoughtful dialogue there. I'm trying to get all of those sayings in. Those are all great. I want to use those in the future. I'm going to be stealing them. Dave, your 35 years of professional leadership experience has included significant time on the Hill. You are really the go-to expert for policy in the conservation community. So tell us what you see coming down the pipe with these new initiatives, like the Farm Bill, just the new Farm Bill, climate. We talked about local foods and people wanting to really know where their food is sourced, environmental finance. What's coming at us, and what do districts need to do to stay at the forefront of these different initiatives?
Thanks, Claire, and kudos to Christopher, another great answer. Near term, I think the near term, we're going to see something happen with climate legislation. I don't know what it will be. Senator Stabenow, chair of Senate Ag, has introduced a bill. There's been multiple bills introduced in the House. There's other bills in the Senate. A lot of them, frankly, focus on more money for EQIP or CSP. Conservation should come out. The conservation community should come out quite well with whatever the climate legislation is. I think longer term will be the next Farm Bill, the 2023 Farm Bill. The last one was 2018, and assuming we're on the 5-year schedule, Congress, the staff at least this year, will start working on that. They'll start talking to one another. They'll start talking to groups. They'll start reviewing some of the past proposals. So the next Farm Bill, really, we need to be there now. You just can't parachute in right before they're going to drop the final bill and say, hey, I'd like you guys to do this. As far as how districts, to stay relevant, we need to maintain the relationships we have, particularly on Capitol Hill. There's no other entity or organization that can reach every single 435 elected representatives in the House and all 100 senators. Every single one of them has a district somewhere, often multiple districts. So establishing relationships with your local office, your local elected officials, with your state officials, with your federal officials, will all pay dividends to us later on. The other thing I think we'll see is, or what I hope we'll see, is increased engagement by the private sector. Krysta's seen this, Rudy's seen this, you've seen this. These major corporations announce, oh, we're going to have a zero carbon footprint by 2030 or 2050, and we're going to ask this or that. And somebody ought to be talking to farmers on how they're going to do that. And I think it's time for the big corporations to start putting some real money into the conservation, whether they're donating it to districts or NACD, or they're working on the Hill to get secure things. But I would like to see major corporations stop issuing these proclamations and start working to get the things done in a reasonable, practical, common sense way on the ground where it counts.
Yeah, that's great. I think districts can still be the hub of all those partnerships, bridge that brings all of those people together.
Yep.
Rudy, you said 46, so now 47 years with your local district. You were the NACD president during the 50th anniversary celebrations in '96. Here we are in 2021, recapping 75 years. What do you think will be the evolutions of the 100th year celebration of NACD in districts? What will they reflect on when they hold this panel 25 years from now? What would you like them to be celebrating? What sort of accomplishments? And if we've got time, I'd love the other panelists to quickly weigh in too on what they'd like to see accomplished in the next 25 and be celebrating and reflecting on.
Well, thanks for that question, Claire, but I think probably what's more important than that, I hit on it on the first part of the question, is surfacing leadership at the local level. I want to tell you an experience I had. I had a number of great experiences as NACD president, and the 50th anniversary was just one of them. But Secretary Dan Glickman, who everybody on this panel worked with at one time, probably other than Claire, called me up one night and he said, Rudy, can you go with Deputy Secretary Rich Rominger out to the White Mountain Apache Reservation? Said they have asked and requested that we send technical assistance out there, and you know that we can't do it unless a district's in place. Said we're going to put together a big celebration and sign the papers with the district in place and put, you know, technical assistance on that reservation. That was one of the neatest trips. And part of the trip and the celebration was they took us on a tour of the reservation and showed us their, you know, a number, I think 4 different stops, showing us, you know, some of their natural resource concerns that they wanted to address. And the district had already been put in place, and the district board was there, and they had a young lady that had been working in the office for, I don't know, maybe 5 weeks or 6 weeks. And every time they stopped, they asked this young lady if she would like to make a comment, and she said no. And the second time, no. The third time, no. But at the last stop, she says yes. And I'll never forget what that young lady said. She said, we got to get conservation out of our head and into our hearts. So we got to look for people that's got the passion for the movement. And that has stuck with me ever since that young lady said that. I mean, it's one thing to have head knowledge, but whenever you have, I guess you can say I got some passion, 47 years, but we need to surface the best and the brightest, you know, to keep this movement going and to bring forth new ideas. You know, I've been trying honestly to get off my local board, you know, for the last few turns whenever it was my turn to be elected, but they just don't want me to get off because of what I know from the historical standpoint. But the other thing is, it's so challenging to find folks to, you know, serve at the local level. And I'm not alone in that. I'm sure it's like that all across the country. The young families today, the young people today, they're so, you know, have so many demands on their lives, you know, that it's just hard to get them to say, yeah, well, they told me it's 1 meeting a month, which turned out to be kind of silly. Whenever I got into it, it was like 130 days a year, God forbid, when I was NACD vice president and president for about 6 years. But I'll never regret doing that. So I think the key thing that we need to look at is leadership. And on that same vein, I want to tell you quickly about another experience we had. Back when I was NACD president, we put together an outreach called Backyard Conservation. I thought, wow, and some of you may remember that outreach. I thought, wow, maybe we'll be able to reach, you know, the people who live in the towns, you know, in the suburbs, and reach out to them. Well, the year we rolled that out at the annual meeting, I guess you could say I was a little excited about it, and we rolled it out and, you know, told what we had. And after that session, this lady come up to me. I do not remember her name. I remember where she was from. She is from the New York City Conservation District. And she said, that is absolutely useless. And she just floored me. I said, you know, of course, I said, absolutely useless. She said, yes, my people at best have windowsills. They don't have backyards. So I tell you that to say this, as we look forward, we got to think out of the box. We got to go out and surface people, because if they eat, if they breathe the air, if they drink the water, you know, they have a say in the natural resources in this great country that God's created and give us the privilege to live here. You know, we're the most privileged people in the world to be able to call the United States of America home. So that's just two little things that go on. And one other thing, whenever I done as president and vice president, you do lots of speaking. And I would say this when a lot of times at these meetings, that we are not an agricultural organization. And I can see eyebrows go up. I can see, a lot of the places I went, but we're not an agricultural organization. We're a natural resource conservation organization, and everybody has a say. So when we go to surface new leadership, we better look broad spectrum. It's like broad spectrum herbicides. Look broad spectrum, to find people that have that passion in their heart, to carry the movement on. So with that, Claire, I'll turn it back to you.
Oh, that's great, Rudy. I really heard a call to action there for me and for all of us in conservation and in conservation leadership. If you've ever had that aha moment in the field where you've changed a mind, or you've brought someone along, or you've facilitated a moment for them to really engage in conservation and feel that passion that we all feel, it's just such an incredible feeling. And it's something that all of us need to remember. That's part of our jobs too in conservation, is to bring up that next generation, to bring out diverse voices to the table to do that, and to bring those next leaders into place. And so that's a great call to action. Dave, any closing comments here as we close out the panel?
Yeah, well, just one brief one. Krysta is very familiar with this. It happened in 2010, and that was the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, which was incredibly tragic. And of course, we were trying to figure out how we could help. And every year, Claire, for tens of thousands of years, migratory birds come from Canada down the Mississippi flyway, shorebirds, ducks and geese and things like that, millions of them. And every one of them was headed right to a disaster zone. And working with conservation districts and other partners, we came up with this little thing called the Migratory Bird Habitat Initiative. And I can remember calling state cons trying to cobble some money together. And we cobbled together $10 million. And we wanted to create instant wetlands. Would farmers work with us to create these loafing areas, feeding areas for these migratory birds, and try to keep them off of the oil area? And I'll remember a call I got from Kevin Norton. He was the state conservationist in Louisiana at the time. He said, Dave, I think you're going to have to come up with more money. I said, why is that, Kevin? He says, we have farmers lined up going around the block at our district offices, wanting to sign up, wanting to help, to do what they could do. So we eventually came up with 40 million. Our goal is to create 100,000 instant wetlands, 100,000 acres. We ended up doing 430,000. But it's just when the community engages around something, wonderful things are possible. And it's such an honor to be associated with districts. Thank you.
Oh, that's an incredible closing note there. And as somebody who grew up along the Mississippi River, I'm a river rat. And so I definitely take a lot of inspiration for my work from that river. And that's great work. Krysta, final thoughts?
Well, I was just listening to both Rudy and Dave, and somewhere in the middle, I remember when I became CEO in 2004, I think it was my first months and weeks, I just would call conservation districts randomly to introduce myself and to learn what was going on. And I'll never forget this lady I called on a bad day. And she said, lady, I don't know who you are, but I'm glad you called. And I'm glad you're asking how we're doing, because I'm telling you right now, we're just trying to survive. And it hit me so hard, and listening to Rudy talk about his district and, the needing more money Dave's talking about to get good work done on the ground. And I pledged then, and I continue to work towards that we're not just talking about districts just trying to survive, but thriving and doing what I call the Lord's work at the grassroots level, locally led, working with landowners, whether it's a windowsill or a huge ranch. It doesn't really matter, because all of it fits to make that one complete, natural resource, and that wise use of that natural resource. So I always kind of had it in my heart that my personal mantra was to make sure the districts thrived, not just survived. And maybe we're not there yet. I hope at the 100th anniversary, I'm not sure I'll be called back to speak. Probably won't be able to hear or talk by then. But I hope then we're talking about the celebration of districts thriving and that our natural resource issues are limited and under control because we've done such a good job in the next 25 years. But thank you again. It is always so good to be with NACD and with conservation districts. I hope next time it's in person.
Wow, what a great panel. What a great message of how much has been done with districts really at the heart of that movement, but how much we still need to do and how far we have to go and what role we can all play, all of us watching this today, in the future of conservation, calling our legislators, finding those next leaders, being active with our districts, calling up our districts and seeing what's new. Thank you to all of our panelists, to NACD, all the districts out there watching today, working day in and day out for our soil and water resources. And again, thank you so much to AgriDrain for their sponsorship of the panel, the support that they do of the work in this space. And I will hand it back to you, Michael.
That was great. Thank you all for your work to get us to where we are today. NACD has an incredible legacy, thanks in part to great leadership and partnership with the three of you over the years. Okay, I'd like to remind everyone again to visit the auction website where the proceeds support conservation, education, and leadership. Again, the auction will remain open until Wednesday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern, but it's important that you bid early and bid often when needed. This afternoon's agenda has a slate of 2 sets of 4 concurrent breakout sessions. Please click back to the agenda following this presentation to read the session descriptions and choose which ones you'd like to attend. Thank you sincerely for your time, and I hope you enjoy your afternoon. I will see you all again on Wednesday afternoon at the closing general session. Enjoy the meeting.